Hey folks, Nicole here of Nicole Gilbert Quilts. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, we are going to be learning how to turn your orphan quilt blocks into fun throw pillow covers. And we'll be using the envelope technique, which you'll be able to use in this project and any other pillowcase project that you choose to do moving forward. Now, I am using this quilt block, which is from the Kapow quilt, which I have completed here. This is a creation by Joanna Marsh for custom quilts. There is a link in the description below so that you can purchase the pattern if you're interested in making this quilt or this pillow. All right, folks, so let's dive in. All right, so what are the supplies that we need to make these orphan blocks into a quilt pillow? Honestly, it's not a lot, especially considering the fact that in this instance, I am using an orphan block, meaning an extra block. Maybe it was your tester block, or maybe it was one that just didn't kind of turn out exactly how you wanted, but not so crazy that you just wouldn't use it. So, because you're using a block like that, it's probably coming from a quilt that you are in the process of making or have just finished. In which case, not only do you have an orphan block, you probably have batting scraps as well. And so what I'm doing here, what I've chosen to use here is an orphan block. This will be for the front. A scrap of batting that's about 2 inches larger than my orphan block all the way around, and I'm going to use that to quilt the orphan block. I have a piece of background fabric that is from the original quilt that is about 2 to 3 inches wider than the orphan block in one direction, and then it's about 6 inches longer than it is in the other. And the reason why we want something of that size, so 2 to 3 inches wider than the block and about 6 inches longer than the block, is that we're going to use this single piece to create the envelope in the back. So we're going to cut it up the middle and we're going to overlap it to create that envelope. So we want it to be just a little bit larger, but it doesn't have to be a huge piece of fabric, which is great. You probably have a piece this large left over from the background of the quilt you just completed. How awesome is that? And then lastly, we'll need another scrap piece of batting. This time, this one's going to be just a little bit larger than that background piece we just discussed. And that's so that we can quilt the envelope flaps for the back of the pillow. Now, do you need to quilt your orphan block or your background, the envelope flaps? No, not really. For the most part, you can do everything that I'm going to show you in this video without quilting them. I like the look of the quilted pillow cover because it gives it a little bit more body, a little bit more shape. And for those of you who have made pillows before and used pillow forms before, you know that not all pillow forms are created equal. So by quilting the front and back of your pillow cover, you are ensuring a little bit more of a full uniform look. Now, the last piece of fabric that you're going to need is something to bind your envelope flaps with. And it doesn't have to be much. I, again, am using some scrap fabric that's going to be left over from my quilt top. It really needs to be, enough to make two 2-inch by 18-inch strips of fabric. That's pretty much it. My binding method is easy and I use it for everything, but it's going to be perfect and it's really, really efficient as far as fabric saving goes. So basically, this is a project that I'm making entirely out of scraps. Pieces that I might not know what to do with, and it's going to be beautiful in the end. So come on, guys, let's get to it. Okay, folks, so now we are going to get started with constructing our quilt pillow. And like I said in the introduction, you can either construct your quilt pillow just with your quilt block and your backing, or you can choose to quilt it like I've done here. And so you'll see this quilting. I just did enough to add a little bit of visual interest on the blocks itself. And then I do like to include the batting also just to give the pillow form itself a little bit of body. So that's why I've chosen to quilt it. You don't have to quilt it. I've done a little bit here just to create visual interest and attach the batting, and then some really basic straight line quilting for the backing fabric. And then this here is for our binding of our envelope pieces, which we'll make out of this backing fabric. So I'm actually going to set this aside. Now, what I want you to keep in mind, here this is a 16-inch unfinished block. Okay, so that's where I've got this now. It's 16 inches unfinished. So when I created my backing fabric for the back of the pillow that will eventually become my envelope pieces, I made sure that my fabric was wider than my block by 1 inch, meaning that if this is on top of it, I have a overhang of about a 1/2 inch on either end. So about a 1/2 inch there. So it's a 1/2 inch there, and then it's 7 inches wider. So it's a 1/2 inch wider by 7 inches. So 1/2 inch by 7 inch in addition to the size of my block. So this is a 16-inch finished block. So we're 17 inches this way. We're 23 inches this way. Okay, the reason why I have those measurements is one, that extra little 1/2 inch at this end, not a huge deal. You could just have it flush, but I like having that little wiggle room so that I can place the block however I want when I'm sewing it and then just trim it up later. The 7 inches is far more crucial. So the reason why you want those 7 inches is because we are in this very next step, which is what I'm going to head off to do now, is we are going to cut directly up the center to make 2 pieces. Okay, we'll use our binding fabric to neatly bind the edge of those pieces. So you'll see this kind of at the edges, and those 2 pieces will overlap to create our envelope, which we'll do in a later step. So what I want you to do now is take this fabric, the backing fabric, cut it into 2 pieces. Okay, then we're going to take our binding fabric and cutting 2-inch strips, and mine will be 2 inch by 17 inch because that's the length here. We're going to make 2-inch strips, and I am just going to bind the 2 halves, and you only have to bind one side because all 3 other edges will get hidden in the seam allowances when we construct our pillow. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here in just a moment. Okay, so we are back from the sewing machine. I've got my quilt block here, just kind of here. And now we've got these 2 pieces that are bound on one side, and they're identical. What we want to do is, remember we had that one long piece that was 7 inches too long? The reason why it was 7 inches too long is so that we have the option of overlapping our pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to overlap them by 3.5 inches. So go ahead, line it up. There's that. And then 3.5 inches, which will be here. And so now you'll see they are overlapped. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this straight up and down all along this edge so that they stay together and they don't move on us through the process. But I'm going to make sure my pins kind of avoid that area that I know my block is going to lay on top of. Okay, so I'm going ahead and I am pinning this every couple of inches or so just to keep it on mark. And remember, we want to keep this as straight as possible, but we intentionally overestimated this back piece because it's just not worth the headache of trying to keep it perfect. You can always trim it in the next step. And so I am never one for fabric wastage myself, but a 1/4 inch here and there to save you, a valuable time and stress, I think is always worth it. So here we have it, nice and pinned all the way around. And I've avoided the area where I think the block will lay, just so that we are not running into those pins when we're sewing. So now I've flipped it over and now it's wrong side up. In my case, you can see the batting. If you've chosen not to use batting, you'll just see your seam allowances. Okay, so now we're going to put this together wrong sides together. Okay, and we're just gonna line this up, lay it on top, and you see I still have a bunch of extra. If I wanted to overlap this further, I would. I just find that envelopes don't do well if there's too much space. You want there to be enough that it lays neatly on top of each other, but not too much because then it becomes a little bit difficult to wrestle that pillow inside the cover. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin this in place, and you'll see on either end that those edge pins that I put on are kind of clearing this, so we don't have to worry about running over those pins that are keeping the envelope pieces together. And then these pins, as we sew around the edge, we will take them out. But what we're doing here is we're creating a French seam. So I'm going to pin this all the way around to keep it nice and taut and fresh. And then I am going to sew 1/8 of an inch all the way around. Okay? So I'm going to sew that 1/8 of an inch, and then I will see you when I get back from the sewing machine. Okay, guys, see you in a moment. All right, so we're back from the sewing machine, and as you can see, I have sewn 1/8 of an inch, my apologies, 1/8 of an inch seam all the way around our blocks. I have also removed all the pins that I had put in the front, as well as the pins in the envelope. And what you're going to see here is that you've got this great envelope flap to put your pillow in. You'll also notice that you have excess all the way around your sewn block. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to line up your block and we're just going to trim it. So bye-bye excess. So the first thing we're going to do is trim all of this off, making sure that we do not trim that seam we just sewed, because that's how we're keeping everything together right now. Okay? So let's trim. Everything's golden. And one last. Now you can at this point do one of, oops, we got a little bit of a hold on. At this point you can do two things. You can take binding and you can bind around all of these edges, and then you are done. You're good to go. You've got this beautiful pillow. Or you can do French seams, which is what I'm going to choose to do, which is turn the whole thing inside out. And you can use one of those fun purple things or a stiletto to really get these corners turned. But you'll turn the entire project inside out. And I've got nice long nails, so I can kind of get that done as well. And make sure your envelope is nice and flat still. And so now we've got this inside out pillowcase. You can see my quilting here. Probably maybe take a stiletto to get into that upper corner to make sure that's nice and flat. Really push it out. We want to make sure that they're as flat as can be, because you can get a little bit of bulk when you're turning something like this around. So we want it really pushed out, really pushed out, really flat. If you'd like, this is another time where you can press this pillowcase so that these, see, like your seam is nice and flat. And what we'll do at this point is we're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch, meaning that that 1/8 of an inch that we sewed the first time is going to get caught on the inside, and then we won't have any raw edges, and our pillow will be smooth and finished, no raw edges around the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and go do that, and then I will see you here in a moment to turn it right back around. Okay, folks, so I am back from my sewing machine, and again, you can see now I have stitched all the way around the edges using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this right side back. And oh man, I could already see those edges, and it's so pretty. And again, if you can't push these corners all the way out, you can use something like a stiletto or a purple thing, which those things are so cool, aren't they? I will have links to both of those items in the show notes. Man, I'm already back in podcast mode. In the description below. And let's see. Let's get this nice and pulled. And check it out, guys. Now we've got these beautiful edges all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and take this to my pressing station so that I can get a really good press out in those corners and seams so that it looks great with a pillow inside. But we are in the home stretch. So I will see you in a moment after I do that, and you will see it beautifully stuffed with a pillow. I'll see you in a little bit. All right, folks, so there you have it. We have a completed Kapow or orphan block pillow completed. So just to kind of highlight some points here, I used just a standard pillow form, plain pillow form. I actually purchased this one off of Amazon. I'll have the link to it. It came in a 2-pack, and I want to say it was like $15, which is great for a pillow form. It is, you see, it's nice and full and fluffy. I will say good pillow forms are hard to come by. So if you out there have a pillow form that you absolutely adore, please let me know about it. Otherwise, I always suggest sizing up your pillow form compared to the size of the pillow cover. So this cover, you'll remember, I stated was 16-inch square. The pillow form inside of here is 18-inch square. And that just allows for this super squishy, super thick, bouncy pillow. So I always size up by 2 inches. You'll notice here how the envelope ended up being in the back. If I pull this open, you can see that binding line from the other side of it. Gets you this nice, clean finish. Super easy, wide opening to stuff your pillow in, and you're ready to go. Now this technique can be used for any size block, any type of orphan block. This same technique, just follow those simple measurement additions for the backing so that you can create your envelope, and you are good to go. I cannot wait to see what you guys get up to. I would love to hear from you, so go ahead and drop a message for me in the comments. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.